Welcome, everybody, to the Beacon of Light podcast tonight. Tonight, we're here with Miss Darcey Hawkins, and we are so excited to bring her to all of you because I think this is a discussion and a conversation that many of us have, but I would dare say we have it within our own small quarters, maybe just within ourselves, because it can be embarrassing. It can be possibly damaging, and it's going to be interesting as we go through this. So any of y'all who are here live, we would love to see you guys popping up. I love it. Look at that. Hello, Miss Christina. Good evening. Hello, Cecilia. Hello, John. Hiya. Thank you all for coming and for popping up here live this evening. So tonight, before we really get started, again, my name is April Tribe-Juke, and I am broadcasting from Kyle, Texas. And yes, we are now free of snow and ice. So, yay! Darcey, tell us where you are broadcasting from this evening.
I am in a town called Spanaway, which is probably, as the crow flies, about 30 minutes south of Seattle, Washington State.
Excellent. That is a beautiful, beautiful place. My husband spent many long hours up in that area, as well as Tacoma, and just kind of all around. So beautiful, wonderful. Thank you, Christina, for sharing. Awesome. Thank you so much. Love that. So now that we kind of have a small introduction, Darcey, why don't you explain to us a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you, April. And again, I am honored to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. So myself, I am an author, clearly, of Who Is That in the Mirror, which I thought would be, my legacy, what I was striving for all my life. And what I realized was Creator put this on my path as a starting point for my healing journey. So the healing journey, what I thought I was healing from was cultural and societal conditioning, and stepping into who I am versus what I was programmed to be, unsure of what were my own beliefs and what were shared with me from my parents, what I learned from society. And I'm a child of the 60s. Granted, I was born in 1960, so a lot of society helped form who I was. And thank you, Cecilia. So looking at the book, I started off with just a small section in there showing that I had been molested as a child. It was a short part of a chapter. It wasn't even inclusive of the whole book. And over time, after it was published, I sat back and I thought about it, and it was, it illustrated what I had gone through and how I healed that part of it, but it was just the beginning of the journey. I was working at, if you look at an iceberg, I was working at the top of the iceberg, not realizing as I was chipping away at it, the rest of it would come up. And that's where I am today, having worked through a lot of that to be where I'm at today, what I see as creator-driven purpose.
Amazing. Isn't it interesting how our journeys start where we're driven and think that we have the answers. And then when we arrive where we think we should have an ending point, suddenly we see the road stretch on and ever on. And we're like, oh, wait, this is the start? Oh, hang on a second. Wait a minute. Back up a minute. And you're looking behind you and you're like, no, this should be the end. Okay, take off that finish line, slap it on start, and I guess here we go. Yeah, It is amazing how journeys happen. And I appreciate the sign of journey because there's two as you go and go and go and go. So in our healing journeys, they're progressions. They can be a little bit of a recession, but there's always a choice, right? So now that you came to this starting line as opposed to a finish line, when you looked at all of these things, what made you decide, all right, I'm in, let's keep going, versus I think I've done enough, I'm sitting down? What was the starting point for you?
It was, the story of the Princess and the Pea. I know it's a fairy tale where she laid on top of all these mattresses and that little pea just annoyed her. Well, that's my pea, is that when I glossed over it in the book, my sexual trauma, I looked at it and when I wrote it, I thought it doesn't matter because I never really paid attention to it. I was so wrong. It so does matter. And coming to realize that sexual trauma, what it did to me, not only the physical act, but from age 10 on, it put a filter over my eyes. So I didn't see life with clarity, the clarity that I was supposed to see, and how I am in alignment. I should have been in alignment with myself. It put a stranglehold on my communication, what I should communicate about my truth. It affected my actions. I was fearful. I lived with limiting beliefs that I wasn't good enough, that I needed to hide so a predator couldn't see me again. And with that knowledge and help with healing, I was able to heal or forgive my abuser probably about, 6 months to a year ago. I was able to forgive my abuser, which was a huge step for me, because at first I was living as a victim, and I was living from a point of scarcity and lack and saying it's all my fault. Somehow I caused this, even though I was 10, and it changed my personality. So then when I got in, then I was really angry after that point. I was so angry at him, and he's been dead a long time, to the point where I forgave him, and it freed me. It literally lifted this weight off of me. And so with the weight lifted off, now I'm finding that I can look at my core beliefs, which are formed from about age 10 and younger. You form your core beliefs to see that, okay, this is not who I am. I was an outgoing little girl. I can be an outgoing woman. But with that core belief, there's tendrils that leak into other parts of our lives that affect how we see, what we say, and what our actions are. And so that's where I'm at with that level of healing on my healing journey. And I want to bring other women with me. I want them to be able to heal, and I want them to be able to thrive into who they're supposed to be without the filter, so they can see their truth of how wonderful they are, because we are all divine children of God. And we have a purpose. We have something that we're supposed to do that our trauma shouldn't be restricting us from.
Amazing. Yes. In just signing that story, thinking about the blocks, trying to paint that understanding of not being able to see through what that veil, what that censorship of yourself did, painting that out visually, it's really powerful to think that's exactly what I did. And Tracy, thank you. She says, I absolutely needed to hear this message right now. It's very applicable. So thank you, Tracy, for listening. Thank you, Darcey, for being brave enough to stop that blockage and now to be open up and be free. You said that as a little girl, you were outgoing, social, connected, looking, curious. And now you say, as a woman, I can be. So have you embraced that? And when did that begin for you as a woman to go after now what these core beliefs have been, even though they've been kind of hidden for so long? Now it's free and open. What do you do now that allows you to be seen now?
The fact that I'm actually on this podcast with you, is evidence. 2 years ago, I had struggles with being in front of the camera where I couldn't even talk. It was pretty funny, actually. Trying to do a 5-minute video to say, I can help you, took me like 36 takes. I actually counted them, and it was awful. What the final product was awful. The fact that I can stand in my own power and know my authenticity is coming through with no blockages, it's amazing. And the fact that not only am I doing this, is that I'm trying to reach out to other women and say, I can help you. I can help you I can help you heal yourself if we just work together. And just moving in that direction. It's just being able to articulate it and share.
Wow. The sharing part of that is very, very powerful. I love it, Cecilia. You are so brave. It takes bravery. It takes this courage. It takes this strength, especially when we have practiced. And I loved what you said, the hiding from, the perpetrator, the hiding, I'm not going to let those things be seen. And when we finally break free and we realize how many, years and stuff that we've lost, we can sit and cry over that, or we can say, I'm not dead yet. I'm not dead yet. I can start from here on until my dying breath and help. And it doesn't take anything back from what was there or quote lost, but it allows for all the gains to happen now. And that is powerful. And it takes courage. And I'm sure there are moments where we stand and we, can I just take a minute? Right? There are those moments, and it's okay because we're not, Superman or whatever, but we are super in our abilities and in the power that has been given to us. And when we realize that, there's no holding back. It just comes
Absolutely.
forward, just comes flying forward. Hello, Nancy. So glad that you're here. Yes. The power and strength in this, we could refer back to your book, Who Is That in the Mirror? So even though the sexual trauma portion of the book is very small, the rest of the book, what is it telling your readers, and what would they benefit from reading this?
When I wrote the book, it was more about confronting cultural and societal conditioning. That the era that I was born in, it was expected that the woman would get married, support her husband, maybe have a job. It was moving more towards that, where a woman had that identity through the job. But it was very much from my parents' perspective that I needed to be a supporting character in my marriage. And that was to ensure my safety and welfare from their point of view. And I understand where they were coming from. So with my mother, she was born in Honolulu, full-blood Japanese, and she lived in a household that honored Japanese culture as well as American culture. Japanese culture, of course, was more prevalent, and men were honored and not so much the women. And in addition to that, with my mom being an American citizen, she went to not only American school Monday through Friday, but Japanese school as well after American school, and then also on Saturdays. So there was a lot of confusion for her in that respect, which then was compounded by the fact that basically she was brought to be raised by what she thought were her parents, but actually were her grandparents, because her grandparents blackmailed her mother when her mother needed help, my grandmother, and said, we will give you help if you give us your daughter to raise as our own. And so she discovered all of this at a family dinner when she was 14. So this was, her focus was, and then she didn't know who her father was. This is her focus to ensure that her children were in a stable marriage where everything was taken care of, everything was concrete, black and white. But of course, life is not black and white. And then when you look at my father, he was born in 1929, and he was born out of wedlock. So my grandmother was called pretty choice names, slut and others that are worse. And of course, my father was called a bastard. And his focus of all his life was to ensure that his children, again, were placed in a family that they would be taken care of. And he had 3 girls and my brother. And so it was really important for him to ensure that we girls were taken care of. So that is what they brought to me and what was imprinted on me culturally and on a societal level, but knowing that I was thinking this was the way it was supposed to be, but it's not. And they did the best they could with the knowledge that they had at the time. So that's where I'm going with the cultural conditioning as well as societal.
I like the perspective of understanding, because it's really full of a lot of grace, right? Because you do the best you can with what you have, with what you know. And if that's what you know, especially if it is carved out of pain and trauma, then you do your best to try and keep things safe and moving forward. And we think about just culturally, looking at from World War II, right? We have this horrific, terrible, intense thing that the entire world is. And as that generation comes back home, they don't say much,
Right.
but they know what they've experienced. And then we break into the 1950s, right? The Leave It to Beaver, everything is going to be good and happy. And you can understand why. They saw the horrors. So we're going to live and go forward with the big and happy. And at the same time, anything with a pendulum, right, that swings, it swung all the way here with the horrors of World War II. It swings all the way here in the 1950s of absolute, fine and dandy. Well, the 60s are coming, and it's going to swing. And so anytime we work in extremes will be the response. And so sometimes we have to break out of those extremes. And like you said, look at the perspective of where they came from, where we come from. And I am so grateful for that grace and opportunity, because when I see my 22-year-old and how I mothered him, now I see my almost 7-year-old who's the baby, and as I mother him, my eyes have definitely been open. And it doesn't mean that, oh, sorry, number one, who's 22, I really messed up. Good luck. No, it means that I can keep giving some of my tidbits, as well as asking for some forgiveness, as well as to say, just, how are you? And where's your perspective and coming from? Because I think that's all part of the healing process, is communication. It is really powerful. So when we look in the mirror and we ask ourselves this question, who is that? How do you help people discover who that is?
It's a process. It's taking a look at what they grew up with, what their limiting beliefs are, what are their filters over their eyes as they're looking at themselves. Are they looking through a filter of trauma? And that trauma doesn't allow them to see themselves. They don't even look at themselves. There was a period of time that I would look in the mirror to brush my teeth, but I never saw me. And it takes me an effort, even now, to look at and see who I am. So that is part of the process, is to see who we are, always remembering that, and this is something I say frequently, is that we're divine children of God, that we are loved and we are worthy just because we were born. Whatever happens to us should not affect that belief, because the highest power approves of us, loves us, finds us worthy. And by the same token, what we say we're good at doesn't affect that either. We are still worthy at the same level. And so to find that, to remove ego from the equation, then we can see who we really are, who has been placed here to ultimately do what we're supposed to do. We truly see ourselves.
That is amazing, to truly, truly see yourself, to smile, to laugh, to think, wow, who I am is really, it is amazing. It is a creation from a higher being. It is a creation from God. And like Cecilia says, seeing yourself means being yourself. How many of you out there are really, truly afraid to be who you know you are inside? Because it might rock the boat of a relationship, or maybe at work, people might find out that you're really the loud and crazy girl instead of just calm and reserved. Who knows, right? there's so many times that if we are really true and authentic to ourselves, the best of our light really shines out. And that light is attracted to so many people. And when we bring that light in, we are actually reflecting it back and helping their light to stretch even further. And so the impact of it just reaches even more. And it is an amazing thing. So Darcey, as you now help a lot of people, right? You bring them in and you start to discuss these ideas with them. How do you start in the process with someone who is just new to this whole experience?
If they've not had coaching before, then it's just a conversation to become comfortable with each other and to know that the information shared is not going anywhere, because that is the major fear of someone who's had sexual trauma, is to know that somebody else knows about it, that they will see us as damaged. So that acknowledgement that it's going to be kept in confidence and it's not going to be shared anywhere, that I will hold space for that person. Once we get past that comfortable, understanding and becoming comfortable with each other, then it's, what do you want to work on? What is looking at you in the present moment that you feel that you need work on? And it can be something small. It can be something to the effect of, well, I want to quit smoking. And I know it sounds crazy, but as we go through the coaching process, we look at the reasons why you want to stop smoking. Was it something that your parents said that you shouldn't smoke because it's not ladylike? And then you start examining that and finding your feelings around that and saying, oh, I'm looking for my father's approval. And so we work on that. And then, why is the approval so important? And it could lead, God forbid, that it could lead into, well, he sexually traumatized me and I'm looking for his approval. Or it could be a simple, I could never please my parents, and so therefore I want to please my parents by quitting smoking. So just starting off with what the person is looking for help with can lead to opening a lot of doors and a lot of awareness.
Wow. It is really interesting. Our behaviors and our actions, they have meaning behind them. And when we drill down to find out what that is, it can be terrifying and revealing, because that's what vulnerability is. Another one of my favorite signs, vulnerability.
Oh, wow. Yes.
Okay, keep that closed. Yeah, I totally understand. Nancy says, at 65, I feel myself most of the time. Took a long time to get here. A true journey. Thank you, Nancy, for sharing that. Amazing healing. Yes, I used to be scared of everything and myself. Looks like we've got some people stepping into their bravery tonight and saying, yes, there is a difference, and things can happen, because when we stand in that mirror and say, who is that? When we learn who that is, the journey then becomes, well, what are we going to do now with that understanding? Who can we help reach, help, fulfill their mission, their purpose, whatever it is. And it is really powerful. So awesome. So Darcey, now that you've shared kind of the process of how all this works, do you share with them parts of your book in your coaching?
Yes, I don't actually pull out the book, but it's really about them. And then I'll ask permission if I can share my part of my story, if it's relevant to what we're discussing, to take a look at the cultural and the societal conditioning, trying to develop habits to honor ourselves with the self-care piece, which covers, down to sleeping, nutrition, and just simple things like that. But also the sexual trauma component, because how do I put it? It changes us forever. It changes us from who we were supposed to be into somebody else that is not of our own desire. And we have an opportunity to change that if we generate the courage to be able to do that. A lot of it is within society, and I look at ourselves as mind, body, spirit, and sensuality as a whole package. And with sexual trauma, we don't want sensuality. We don't want sexuality. We want to be left alone. And that's not the reality that we live in, especially if we're looking for further relationships. My belief is, how can we have an honest relationship with a partner if we're not healed with our sexuality portion of it? And so if we look at sex as a society, we have difficulty just talking about sex as a normal part of life. We get embarrassed, and I'm the first one to do that. I was embarrassed when I had to talk about it, and it was an awkward conversation with my children. I tried as best as I could with what I felt comfortable in sharing. And that's how I applied it to my life. And if we look at sex as a difficult subject to talk about, how do we talk about our own sensuality when we've been sexually traumatized? We can't, because we look that we're broken, that we are not enough, that somehow it's our fault. So if we can't talk about our sexual trauma, it sits there and it festers, and it becomes something more than it should have been. And while our abuser did that to us, and we feel the feels of everything about that, there comes a point where we have to say enough is enough. And whatever means is available to us, mental health therapy, coaching, whatever it is, hypnotherapy, we need to seek help from somebody else to be able to speak our truth, to rip off that stranglehold on our communication, off our throat, which is our throat chakra, and be able to speak our truth, to take the blinders off so we can see with clarity who we are, what our purpose is, and to have a safe space to do that in, because it is so difficult to be able to talk about it and not be embarrassed and not to feel less than. And with that in mind, I went and established a group for women who are ready to thrive past sexual trauma, to have a safe and sacred place to be able to speak about, mostly about how they're going to thrive past their sexual trauma, but to share of their sexual trauma if that is what they want to do, that it's a sacred place, it's going to be confidential, and it's not going to be shared outside of the group.
That's beautiful, to have a place to know that it is, confidential, and to work through it. I think that as we're working through the emotions, that's really new for a lot of things, because for a long time it's been pushed down, hidden, tucked away, disassociated with, all of those things. And suddenly we're like, it's right there. And it's just like anything, walking through the sticky, getting wet, whatever, going through it, actually, when you see things on the other side, okay, I made it. I guess some says I survived. And yet that the more we purge through, it comes up and we go through it, comes up and we go through it, we'll see bigger and deeper gaps of time before the next one has to come up. I'm sure at the beginning it feels like this rapid fire and you're just like so overwhelmed. But then as it begins to clear, sorry, let's bring something kind of funny into this, right? My kids are really into the Dr. Pimple Popper lady, right? And they're like, ooh, give it a squeeze, right? And so the first little part is just this gross. And then as she keeps going, it gets less and less and less until finally it's gone. And then there's usually, depending on what it is, some last thing that she finally has to snip out. And by the time it's done, it's just a shriveled up little whatever, and it's done. But that first part and the fear and the build up to the actual part, again, sorry if anyone's gagging having their dinner, I apologize. But really, it's the working through. And the reason why I picked that is because it's awful, it's sticky, it's gross, it's embarrassing, it's hard conversations. See, when I was 43 and I had to finally face what happened to me when I was 8, I was like, I'm good. I'll go make some bread. I don't need to do this right now. And it was just prompting after prompting after prompting. Right, right, right. And each thing would come up and the wave would go through. And I remember washing myself in the shower again and again and just cleansing myself and then thinking, okay, it's okay now. And then a week or two would go by and then another hit would happen and I would be writing it out and then I would take a shower and I would just cleanse myself from it. And it was, wow, it's just amazing how you can thrive after that trauma and the forgiveness that happens with that, the forgiveness of yourself, that you are no longer anywhere near blame. You never were, but now you finally believe that the blame was not yours. And
Right.
the forgiveness of someone else, you really are free. That whole burden, as it's lifted off of you, you rise, you fly, your voice is strong. And I just think about you standing here in the camera, sharing with us with such strength tonight, and thinking 2 years ago, it took 36 takes to say 5 minutes worth of stuff. So
Absolutely.
living proof, ladies and gentlemen, right here, living proof. She's exactly it. I think this is something from Christina. This is part of your Facebook group, right? This is your group?
Yes.
Thank you, Christina. So she has the link right there. It kind of covers up us, but it's in the chat. So if you need it, right there it is. It's in the chat. Thank you, Christina, for that. Well, we're kind of at the end of our time together. So Darcey, I like to have our guests have kind of that last word. And what would you like to leave us with tonight?
Each of us, are the only ones who can make a difference in our own lives. No one can do it for you. And we have to make ourselves a priority, just like we make our children and our spouse or our significant other a priority. We, by our birthright, deserve to be at that same level, and that we should honor ourselves in such a way. And as an add-on, for those who have been affected by sexual trauma, whether you are ready to move into thriving, I would encourage you to join my group. It's a group for us all. It's a sisterhood. It's a community for women who are ready to thrive, to be able to action their truth, to be able to speak their truth, to be able to see and look at themselves in the mirror for the beauty of who you are, that you are not a victim, you were victimized.
Thank you, Darcey. I will leave it at that. Beautiful evening. Thank you, Lori, Nancy, Cecilia, Christina, so many who've joined us this evening. We are so grateful. Thank you again so much. We will see you again next time, next Tuesday night at 7:30. Thanks, Darcey. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.